Today let's talk about how to create an idea. One of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to creating ideas is that they often try to create them from scratch. Let me share my perspective with you. Ideas are basically what you bring to the table. It's something that you just bring. In other words, ideas are not something you create from scratch, not something you come up with, but something you bring. Some of you might think that you can just copy and paste well, but that's not what I mean. Perhaps the type of people who are good at creating ideas will agree with the expression bring. The worse you are at creating ideas, the more you try to create them from scratch. The book A Technique for Producing Ideas says that an idea is nothing more nor less than a new combination of old elements. This book was a bestseller in the US. I think it's very true. However, that is not a method that suits the Japanese very well. Because I feel the method of thinking of every possible combination and creating ideas from there is only possible in countries where large-scale brainstorming is the norm. We Japanese are not very familiar with the method of creating a huge number of ideas and then making one or two of them work. Rather, when you need an idea or want to come up with something, think about the way you can create that idea. So, what I recommend is to think about structure. What I mean by structure is the fundamental elements that make things what they are. If we think in terms of structure, we can say that curry and beef stew, for example, are the same dish. What I'm trying to tell you is this. Curry is made by boiling meat, potatoes, and carrots, and then adding curry roux at the end. However, if you add red wine and beef broth for the final seasoning, it becomes beef stew. If you add curry roux, it becomes curry. That's all about it. So if you think in terms of structure, you can see that curry and beef stew are the same. However, you need to know how to cook it to reach that point. Curry is a Japanese food and beef stew is a Western food, so you may think that there is no relation between them. For example, in the case of manga, Kochikam and Dairyman have the same structure. The general story of Dairyman goes like this. Nobite is being bullied and asks Dairyman for help. Dairyman then gives him a magical tool. In Kochikami, the main character is just one person playing both Nobite and Dairyman. To be accurate, if you go back to past episodes, there are occasional times when the main character begs for help from his coworkers and he is helped. But in most episodes, the main character gets into trouble and comes up with a solution on his own. Let's think about how Dairyman develops the same story every time. Nobite, overcome by his own greed, uses the tool in the wrong way, or uses it too much, and fails. Or Dairyman ends the episode with the same failure as Nobite. In the case of Kochikam, the episode ends with the main character, overcome by his own greed, making a business that should have been going well fail. Kochikam is a great manga. When the author changed the storyline from the one he used in the early days to that of the later ones, he decided that this was fine to be that of Dairyman. Here he thought in terms of structure. He thought about what kind of story he could write for a weekday shonen magazine. He came up with a pattern where the main character overcomes his greed and fails at the end of the story. In every episode he finds a solution. It seems to work well at the beginning, but in the end it fails. He used the same pattern as Dairyman. This pattern means structure. For example, when we think about the structure of social infrastructures such as gas, water, and electricity, we see them all as part of the social infrastructure. So we can think of these as the same group. Then what about things like smartphones and cell phones? They are just as necessary to society as gas, water, and electricity. Despite this, we actually have to buy our own phones, which is a funny trick. In today's world, a smartphone is a device that you absolutely need to have in order to live. But the system is such that you have to buy the phone and pay for the phone bill by yourself. Let me go over how social infrastructure works. You know that the government pays for the cost of supplying gas, water, and electricity to each home, and you pay the bills depending on how much you use the gas, water, and electricity. Depending on how many cubic meters of gas, liters of water, and kilowatt hours of electricity you use. That's the way it should be. However, this is not how smartphones work. It's a funny system, you pay for everything. I'm not criticizing the system of smartphones, just to be clear. Think of it in terms of structure, as if a smartphone is also one of the infrastructures. Then, why is it like this? And how is TV like this? The idea expands horizontally like this. Dairyman and Kochikem have the same structure. Curry and beef stew have the same structure. If you compare it to other social infrastructures and assume that the smartphone may be one of them, you will get various ideas. Like when you create a song, you start to think about which songs are similar to a song you want to create. Now let's get into talking about how to create ideas, using manga as an example. Alright, I'm going to stand up and talk to you. This is a story that I used to tell in my university lectures. I used to use it in my lectures about 8 years ago. And today I'm going to talk about it for the first time in a while. You know Death Note, don't you? It was a lecture for students who wanted to become manga artists in the future. First of all, I had to know which manga everyone was reading at the time. I used to use Dragon Ball as an example. But, as the generation went down, more and more students had never read it or had only seen GT, so I had to find another one instead. Then I read Death Note. It was a manga that was popular among both boys and girls for some reason. So I chose it. When you create an idea, you start by thinking about how you can convert this manga into a shoujo manga. There aren't many people who think this way. I was asked if there were any good ideas for shoujo manga. I said, then take a manga that you really like and convert it forcibly into a shoujo manga. That's what I was talking about earlier. What would happen if you made a story with the same structure? It's very difficult to take a famous shoujo manga and arrange it in your own way. For example, let's say you like Nana. If you want to write a manga like Nana, so you arrange it in your own style and draw it, others will easily see that it's a copy and paste. Instead, you bring in the structure from a manga that you really like, but is in a very different genre. A lot of aspiring female manga artists try to get their inspiration from Black Butter or other shoujo manga that are popular and stable among girls, and create ideas from there. That's why it's so hard. Instead, convert a completely different genre of manga, like Death Note, into a shoujo manga. Also, let's say we're creating an idea for a manga that could be serialized in a weekly shoujo manga magazine. We set a frame here. How do you create an idea for a manga that could be serialized in a shoujo manga magazine? Let's quickly break down the structure of Death Note. Whoever's name is written in the book will die. So it's called Death Note. Whoever's name is written in the book will die. This is a shonen manga, drawn with realistic pictures, and with an element of horror. Then how would it look if it were converted to a shoujo manga? It's a shoujo manga, so you can't draw any murders. Then what do you think of using a notebook in the same way? For example, how about you write a story named Love Note where he fell in love with you if you wrote his name in a notebook? Of course, the editor wouldn't accept that. They'd notice it's a copy and paste easily. You should avoid it. In such cases, you should have a deep understanding of the structure of Death Note to know which parts to convert and which parts not to convert. Let's go over the structure of Death Note together. Light Yagami. This boy is the main character. Write Moon in Chinese characters and pronounce it Light. He is the main character. The story is about a battle between Light and L. Quite simply. On Light's side he has a Shinigami Luke. I'll write it very simply. Light was Shinigami Luke on his side. Can kill people by writing their names in a notebook. L realizes that Light might be the murderer. He questions him obsessively. These two characters are play and attack in the story. L is looking for various pieces of evidence to arrest Light. The center of the story is the notebook, Light, and L, but it would be too much of an advantage for Light in this circumstance, so we need to add his father here. Without analyzing the structure, it's actually hard to see what's going on here. For example, Mizuna Amane, she is on the side of Light, and many other characters start to bother you. But if you think about it in terms of structure, the most important characters are Light, L, and his father. This father's job is detective. Without him, it's impossible for Light and L to have a connection. This father's the only one who can connect L, an internationally successful detective, with Light, a simple high school student. He's a detective, that's a good point. However, he is not portrayed as a very important character in the manga. He is portrayed as a good guy. He's a detective with a normal sense of justice and normal investigative skills. As such, his character is not in the close-up, but considering the structure, it's a very important role. So I'll add him here too. Now, let's use this structure as the basis for a shoujo manga. When converting it into a shoujo manga, it can't be called Death Note, as I said before. We need something more understandable to shoujo manga readers, more sympathetic than a notebook, more sympathetic than death. How about a love smartphone? 8 years ago, I called it a love cell phone, by the way. I'm going to set it up as the smartphone for love. It's a good start. There aren't many editors who think of Death Note from love smartphone or love cell phone. That's all we need to start. Now, let's say you make a phone call to him with a smartphone and ask him to fall in love with you, then he will fall in love with you. This would be too almighty, isn't it? Indeed, Death Note also has a limit to its ability. You have to know both the name and the face. You can only change the circumstances of death and the cause of death within 6 minutes and 40 seconds, and many other restrictions. For example, if Light wants to kill L and writes in the notebook that L will be killed, that is absolutely not allowed. The Death Note has these kinds of restrictions. It's not that just whoever's name is written in the book will die. We need some restrictions to make it easier to use as a story. Let's say that he will always tell you the truth on the phone. When you make a phone call and talk to him on this love smartphone, he will tell you the truth only. You will have a great advantage in love only with this power. But maybe it's too few. So let's add some more restrictions. You can think of this in the same way as Death Note. What I'm doing now is just converting Death Note into a shoujo manga. I've been saying this in every lecture for a long time. Any originality is not required at all. All you need to do is convert Death Note into what it would be like if it were a shoujo manga. As I've said before, you start creating ideas in this way by bringing something that you can use. The next step is to simply convert what you've brought into a different form. There's no problem at all.